while because I could remember him while I was in the office with him. And Aquino is like I said before, this is way later on in the end of the story, but I asked him like what he was and what he was from. He was like a black reptile with fangs. He kind of had gold eyes on the sides, kind of a snout. He was wearing like a red robe and a red hood. And he said he was once worshipped in ancient Egypt. He was like the serpent god of ancient Egypt. And we were talking about him in the office, and Robert got kind of almost spooked, and he said we should stop talking about Aquino now. And I said why? And he said Aquino's fourth density. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said fourth density is astral plane, spirit world. He said if we talk about him too much, we can conjure him. And I said, we could conjure him? Like, I was like, really? And he said, yeah, like, that's like how their reality works. He said he could be in this room right now, and we wouldn't even know it.
Do you have all your memories of being there for 20 years or a certain percentage?
Certain percentage. He told me a lot, and that was a big reason why I remember. You know, I think he was like telling me, the reason he was telling me these things is because he realized I wasn't going to go back and get my mind rewiped. And he wanted me to know that this wasn't just like something I was making up. This wasn't just something, you know, happening in my mind, you know. So I think he was telling me everything to save my sanity. But yeah. So he told me you're going to remember it in real time, is how he put it. So as the me up there in the program creates new memories, I remember them down there. I can remember down here. I can remember the beginning and the end, but it was something like I had a blanket in the middle. Like I couldn't remember the middle. And so when I went to the program, you know, after I worked in the mines of the moon, and this was something else he told me, I wanted like a timeline. Like I wanted to kind of figure out where I was and how long I was there. I wanted to make sense out of it. And I said, I remember being in mines. I said, was that in Earth? He said, that was in the moon. And I said, I was in the moon? He said, yes. I said, how long? He said, 3 months. And then he said, after that, I was in the Dark Fleet, like Nachtwaffen, like off-world German kind of mercenaries that worked for the Draconian Empire. And he said I was in the Dark Fleet for 2 years. And then he said the rest of the time I was with them. But it was kind of like a joint task force between Solar Warden and like the Pleiadians. It was like they were working together. And we were almost kind of like customs, I guess you would say, of Earth. He said the moon was in the future. He said it was freed. You know, there was like a kind of a slavery going on the moon. That was freed. He said that the Earth is on lockdown. Like nothing's allowed in and out without Solar Warden's permission, kind of thing. Like no ships are allowed in or out on Earth. It's just like in a lockdown period. And so in the mines, in the moon, it was like, that's exactly what we were doing. It was just kind of like long bits, like you see with like oil and stuff like that. I don't remember exactly what we were mining. It was very dusty and cold. There were brothels there and all that stuff. And this woman who was the nurse, who was the IT and things like that on the base, she became kind of like my girlfriend when I was there. And then after that, I remember Robert came up, and you know, they seemed like they wanted to keep people together who were in the command and the base to kind of keep track of them, if that makes sense. And Robert showed up one time, and I didn't know who he was, and he talked to one of the German officers, and the German officer held like a device in front of me and then started yelling at like the German who was the first class petty officer. He was giving me a hard time, the one that said I should have you executed for what you did to my man. And I was getting beaten a lot and stuff. He was like giving people extra. You had almost like a commissary kind of thing, payment, where you could buy things like chocolate and beer and things like that. They gave you like a little bit of money. And so they had this German officer. He went up to this other one and started yelling at him. And then he came up to me and he said, "You're coming with me now." And I went with him. I got processed into the Dark Fleet. They put strapped me down to a table. And like a guy like in a doctor's outfit, he showed me a syringe and he said, "This is your implant. I'm going to put it into your brain." They put like a syringe like directly through my skull and left an implant there. And then the table flipped over and they gave me almost like a spinal tap. And I felt something cold, and I think that was the tech they were putting into my body. People call it like black goo and stuff like that. They put almost like a technology into you. Makes you stronger, faster, smarter. but it also kind of takes away your ability to say no. You become almost like a board kind of thing, like a hive. You know what I mean? When you're in the dark fleet, you really don't have your own kind of ability to kind of say no. Like it's so because you have to do pretty bad stuff. And I was in Mars for a long time in the dark fleet. We were mostly capturing like mantises, they call them. They look almost like praying mantises, and they're really good with DNA manipulation. And so the reptile's one of them for DNA manipulation, like to tell them more about their studies with DNA manipulation. And so yeah, I was getting everything they wanted. I was, capturing all the mantises they wanted. Sometimes we'd get into skirmishes with reptiles. There was like a reptile species that lived on Mars. Sometimes the mantises and reptiles would band together and fight us. I remember Robert told me, he said you died the third day you were on Mars when he was talking to me. And I remember now, we were overrun by reptiles, and I just saw like a mouth go over my face, and everything went black. And he said that you're a clone. It was like one of the ways he was trying to get me to go back into the chair. He was like kind of telling me how things worked. It kind of freaked me out to get my mind wiped. And I kind of had a panic attack almost because, I'd seen sci-fi movies, and I said, well, I'm a clone. I said, what's the point of me like living? I'm not even like the real Daryl. I just have memories of him. And he said, you don't understand. He said, they're able to salvage your consciousness. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better. He said, they made an exact replica of your body in every way and just put your soul back into it. He said, that's the part that makes you, is your soul, your consciousness. And put your soul back into it. That's the exact replica of he said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better. He said, they made an exact replica of your body in every way and just put your soul back into it. That's the part that makes you, is your soul, your consciousness. And so I was getting everything. I was capturing all the mantises they wanted, and I remember I went into like a room of the reptiles, and the reptiles, there was like they called him the master. There was like a head reptile, and he had like 3 others with him. And it seemed like the reptiles were kind of in command of the off-world Germans. And basically said to me that, everything you did, you're doing everything we tell you to do. You're getting everything we want. And we'll tell them to be easy on you when you go back to Earth. And then there was like a different high-ranking German there that day. And they took me into like a separate room. And he told me that the reptiles are lying to you. They're not going to be easy on you. He said, your only living relatives are your mother and your sister. And we'd like you to join the Dark Fleet, like, full time. And, to escape death, like, But, so I thought about it, and I said, I asked him if I get permission to speak freely, sir. And he said, granted. And I said, are there horses on your world? And he said, yes, I have several horses. And, I said, I want what you want. And he said, what do you mean? You want to be an officer? And I said, well, if I earn that, then yes, but I want what you want. I want to be able to own land. I want to have a German wife, and I want to have German children with her. I basically told him I wanted citizenship, like full citizenship, if I was going to do this. So they discussed it, and then the next day they came back, and they said, you've been approved. I went on their world, and I remember Robert asked me, he's like, what was it like? What was the German world like? And he said they're very secretive. He had never been there. And I thought about it, and I said it was like the 40s. He said, what do you mean? I said men wear suits and fedoras, women wear dresses and pillbox hats. And they had like a very advanced like public transit kind of thing where they had like trams, but they also had almost like a sidewalk where it was like sidewalks that would kind of slowly speed you up, and then you hit like a main one, and you were on this main sidewalk. So you could kind of go on like little branching paths, and it would take you into like a main kind of conveyor belt, like a fast movie, like 50, 60 mile an hour, like conveyor belt. And I met a woman named Helen there, and I was engaged to marry her. And then I had to go back on the ship, and I was kind of wearing their same uniforms. Their uniforms are almost like a Gestapo uniform, like a black kind of uniform, like what the Germans wore in World War II. And on the space station. We went to a space station, and I remember the first officer was good friends with me. And the first officer on the ship was actually the S3 in England, in the command I was in the Navy. So it was like these Germans were actually going back and forth from Earth to their ships and things like that, and while this is happening. And we went to this kind of like a space station almost thing, where it was almost like a big rectangular block. There were windows in the front, like the two sides were just nothing but seemed like glass, transparent aluminum, whatever you want to call it. And in the back there were levels, and a lot of trade went on. A lot of things were like different factions that were warring and things like that. We're discussing terms of peace or maybe the acts of war and things like that. That's what kind of happened here. It was almost like a UN, like a way for different beings to come together who are at war to discuss peace and everything. And when I was there, I saw I only see like reptiles and grays and things like that. But when I was there, I saw all of these different species. I saw like the feline, I saw like the canine. I saw like Arcturians, they have like the deep blue sapphire skin, big black eyes, and their pupils look almost like a swirling blue galaxy kind of. So I saw these different beings walking around. And a lot of it was small too, like kind of zipping around, like little 2-foot, 3-foot beings, sometimes shorter. And there's almost like an unspoken rule where the taller beings walk very slow, and all these littler ones were kind of like zipping around everywhere. And a man and a woman came up, just blonde hair, blue eyes, like eyes a bit bigger than ours, but that was about it. And the woman said something to the head reptile, like, the cargo rightfully belongs to us. It does. You took it from us. You need to give it back. And then the reptile replied something like, since we invested so much time and training into the cargo, it rightfully belongs to us now. And then the man came up and he had a smart glass pad, and he basically showed him like an article. And he said, you are in violations of this treaty. If you don't give the cargo to us immediately, it will be considered an act of war. So the reptile read it all, and he threw his hands up in the air and he walked away. And then the woman came up to me and said, "You're coming with us now." And so I really wasn't like a full German yet. I really had no say so. I was just kind of like a select, I guess you'd call me. And so I went with them, and their ship was kind of like the Billy Meyer. It was like a polished metal, like saucer kind of ship. And because they had like a hangar area in this place. And when I went to the back of the ship, and it looked like poured metal. It was just like one long booth that kind of went around. And I sat down, and then they were in the front at first, and I was by myself. And then after a while, they came back, and they were looking at each other, and I heard her say, "He looks disturbed." And the man said, "Wouldn't you be if you had to live with them?" And
Yo, I'm going to stop it right here. Comment down below if you want to hear more of this guy's story. You know what I'm saying? I find these stories very interesting, man. I don't know if you are into this type of stuff, you know what I mean? But it just lets you know that we are definitely multi-dimensional beings, and we're living more different lives, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of things is going on. Remember, you're not just your physical body. There's a lot of things that you're doing in the galactical spiritual world that you do not remember. And basically, it's the reason. And this man was one of the fortunate ones to be able to remember his stories, so that way he can share it with us. But some of y'all are not ready. Y'all not mature enough to remember your stories about you being abducted from ETs or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? Because trust me, these beings been here, and they're snatching people. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's not all bad. It's I'm not saying it's all good, but it's not all bad. But at the same time, Romans 8:28 says, "For all things work together for the good to those that love God." So that's for you Christian people out there. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff that we're going through, and you're fighting battles, but it's for your own safety. The reason why you don't remember everything that's going on in other dimensions, because some people won't be able to handle that. You see what I'm saying? You won't be able to handle seeing a big 6'9", blue, monster, you know what I'm saying, talking to you, you know what I'm saying, that might freak you out. So that's the reason why some of us get our minds swiped and our memory swiped, because, some people, when they come back into this physical realm and they remember things like that, they have nightmares and stuff, and they off themselves. You see what I'm saying? So that's why, because it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, why would these people be swiping your minds? They swiping your shit for your own safety. If it's meant for you to look, if it's meant for you to remember, you'll remember. You know what I'm saying? So it's all based on your maturity. This is some heavy stuff, man. But hey, the information is out. We live in a sci-fi world, y'all. So when you watch these sci-fi movies, believe in it. Watch it. See it with the third eye. Know that it's real. Okay? Know that it's real. Holla back, y'all. I'm going to have some more of this, because this video is long. This video is like an hour long. So I'm gonna be breaking it down. Putting some other clips up. Holla back.